The most dangerous lie in basketball history isn't about Michael Jordan winning 6 championships. The most dangerous lie is that Michael Jordan won those 6 championships against nobody. Say it out loud. Nobody. According to a growing army of internet historians, Michael Jordan basically walked into the NBA Finals 6 different times and found 6 empty locker rooms waiting for him. The Lakers were finished. The Trail Blazers were pretenders. The Suns had no defense. The Sonics collapsed. The Jazz were retirement home basketball. 6 rings, 0 real opponents. That is the story being sold every single day on every single platform, in every single comment section, on every single sports podcast trying to farm outrage clicks for algorithm points and cheap engagement metrics on the timeline. And that story is a scam. Not a small one. Not a harmless one. A full-blown, receipts required, historically fraudulent scam wearing a suit. Because when you actually pull the tape, when you actually pull the records, when you actually pull the MVP ballots and the win totals and the rosters, something very uncomfortable happens. The teams Michael Jordan beat were monsters. And the reason nobody remembers them as monsters is because Michael Jordan personally erased them from the memory of the sport. That is the untold truth of the Jordan Finals. And by the time this breakdown is over, the weak competition myth will not just be wounded. It will be buried under 61 wins a season, buried under 3 separate MVP trophies, and buried under 6 of the most disrespected championship rosters in the history of professional basketball anywhere on planet Earth. Start with a number. 61. 61. That is the average regular season win total of every single team Michael Jordan met in the finals. Not the best one. The average. Read that again. In a league with an 82-game schedule, Michael Jordan's 6 finals opponents averaged 61 wins. That is not weak competition. That is a firing squad wearing basketball jerseys. And yet, somehow, the modern narrative has convinced millions of fans that Michael Jordan was running through a preschool with a stopwatch and a smirk on the way to lunch every single afternoon. So let's do what the takes never do. Let's actually go team by team, series by series, receipt by receipt, and put this myth on trial in open court with the tape rolling and the numbers on the wall. And the first defendant on the stand is the team everyone thinks was the easiest. The 1991 Los Angeles Lakers. The 1991 Los Angeles Lakers were not a corpse. That is the first lie that has to go, and it has to go loudly and immediately. When Michael Jordan met Los Angeles in June of 1991, the story being told today is that Michael Jordan walked into an empty gym in Inglewood. Kareem was gone. Magic Johnson was aging. Showtime was over. It sounds convincing until the numbers actually speak. Los Angeles won 58 games that year. 58. Best record in the entire Western Conference. Magic Johnson was still, at that exact moment, a top 5 player on planet Earth, and anyone claiming otherwise is confusing highlight reels with reality. James Worthy was an all-star scorer with a first step that most modern wings would still lose to on a fast break. Sam Perkins was a stretch big before the league even had a word for stretch bigs. Vlade Divac was rising into one of the most skilled young centers in the sport. And this roster carried something Michael Jordan had never touched. Rings. Championship muscle memory. Deep June experience baked into their bones. And here is the detail nobody mentions when they call this series a walkover. Before the finals started, the majority of national analysts picked Los Angeles to win. Not the Bulls. Los Angeles. Why? Because Michael Jordan had 0 finals appearances. Michael Jordan had never conquered a finals stage. Magic Johnson had already conquered 5. Then Game 1 hit the floor and the Lakers stole home court in Chicago. In that single moment, the entire basketball world thought Michael Jordan was about to collapse in June yet again. Instead, Michael Jordan flipped a switch that had never been flipped before in NBA history. 4 straight wins. Over 31 points, nearly 11 assists, 6 rebounds a night, controlling every possession on both ends of the floor. And then came the mid-air hand switch layup in Game 2, a physical impossibility that became the visual signature of a takeover. Los Angeles was not weak. Los Angeles was ambushed by a player who had just become something the league had never seen before. Verdict on defendant 1, not guilty of being easy. Case dismissed with prejudice. Now bring in the second defendant. The 1992 Portland Trail Blazers. This one is where the modern narrative gets truly embarrassing to watch out loud. Portland is treated today like a warm-up act, a speed bump, a formality on the road to a coronation. Portland was actually one of the deepest, most dangerous rosters in the entire early 90s. 57 wins. Second in the MVP race with Clyde Drexler finishing behind only Michael Jordan himself. Terry Porter running the point at an elite level, an all-star point guard capable of taking over any fourth quarter. Jerome Kersey defending wings like his contract depended on it. Kevin Duckworth carrying all-star size in the paint. Buck Williams bringing the kind of physical toughness that shows up in the 8th minute of the fourth quarter when everybody else is gassed and bent over gasping for air. This was not a one-star team. This was a legitimate finals contender that had already been to the finals 2 years earlier. And here is what the easy competition crowd never wants to talk about openly. Before the series started, half the country genuinely believed Clyde Drexler was in the same tier as Michael Jordan. That was the actual debate on national television every single night. Not, is Portland good enough, but, is Drexler basically Jordan? Michael Jordan heard that. Michael Jordan filed it. Michael Jordan opened Game 1 and dropped 6 three-pointers in the first half alone. Michael Jordan, in an era where entire teams took 12 threes in a whole night, hit 6 in 24 minutes. The shrug happened right there on the floor, live, in front of millions of witnesses. And the shrug wasn't cocky. The shrug was a public execution captured on camera and preserved on tape forever. Portland had elite offense, elite defense, elite size, elite belief. Michael Jordan turned an elite team into a footnote in 6 games. Verdict on defendant 2, not guilty. And yet still remembered as a joke, purely because Michael Jordan made them look like one on primetime television for the entire world to see live. Defendant 3. 1993. The Phoenix Suns. And this is the moment the myth doesn't just crack. It shatters into pieces so small even the takes can't gather them off the floor with a broom and a dustpan and a shop vacuum. 62 wins. Best record in the entire National Basketball Association. Charles Barkley, freshly acquired, freshly crowned the actual regular season MVP. Not a runner-up. Not a finalist. The actual MVP of the entire league. Kevin Johnson at point guard, sprinting the floor like the game owed him money. Richard Dumas scoring from everywhere on the floor. Tom Chambers, Danny Ainge, shooters and creators stacked from the starting 5 deep into the bench. If Michael Jordan had lost that series, nobody today would call Phoenix weak. Nobody. Not one person. They would be remembered as one of the great teams of the entire decade. Instead, Michael Jordan averaged over 41 points a game. 41. In an NBA Finals. Against the reigning MVP. Against the team that had home court advantage on their side. That is not a statistic. That is a warning shot fired at every future generation of basketball players. And even with that historic offensive performance, Phoenix still forced 6 games. Game 6 came down to John Paxson lifting a corner 3 in the dying seconds after Horace Grant refused to shoot. 1 inch different on that pass and the series goes to a Game 7 in Phoenix, where anything could have happened on that floor. That is what easy competition apparently looks like now in the modern retelling. Verdict on defendant 3, not guilty. And frankly, insulted by the accusation delivered. 3 defendants. 3 innocent verdicts. 3 teams that averaged nearly 59 wins between them. 3 finals opponents featuring Magic Johnson, Clyde Drexler, and the sitting MVP Charles Barkley. Pause on that. Take a breath. Because the weak competition claim has already collapsed under its own weight and Michael Jordan has only won 3 rings so far. Now comes the second three-peat. And this is where the myth doesn't just die. This is where the myth gets a headstone, a burial ceremony, and a permanent no trespassing sign posted at the gate of the cemetery for good measure and eternal rest. 1996. The Seattle Supersonics. 64 wins. Read that number one more time. 64 wins in a single season. That is more regular season victories than any team Michael Jordan met during his first 3 championships combined into an average. Seattle did not stumble into the finals. Seattle detonated the Western Conference to get there. And Seattle came into that finals with the one weapon almost no other team in the 90s had. A defender specifically built to attack Michael Jordan. Gary Payton. Reigning Defensive Player of the Year. Considered by many, then and now, the greatest defensive point guard the sport has ever produced. Add Shawn Kemp in his athletic prime, an entire highlight reel wearing number 40. Add Hersey Hawkins spacing the floor. Add Sam Perkins knocking down threes from beyond the arc. Add Nate McMillan running defensive schemes like a coach in a jersey. This was not a Cinderella story. This was a machine engineered to end a dynasty. And the modern narrative points at the 6-game result and shrugs. That shrug is dishonest to the tape. Chicago went up 3-0. Then George Karl made a decision that reshaped the series in real time. Gary Payton on Michael Jordan. Full time. Every possession. And instantly, Michael Jordan's efficiency cratered. Seattle won Game 4. Seattle won Game 5. For a brief window, the impossible was on the table. No team in NBA history had ever come back from a 3-0 deficit in the finals. Seattle almost did it. Michael Jordan closed the door in Game 6, but pretending Seattle was a pushover is a rewrite of reality that requires ignoring the tape entirely. Verdict on Defendant 4, not guilty. Emphatically not guilty ever. 1997. The Utah Jazz. 64 wins. Karl Malone as the reigning regular season MVP. John Stockton still running the smartest point guard operation in the entire sport. Jeff Hornacek stretching defenses to their breaking point. Brian Russell locked in defensively on the wing. Jerry Sloan on the sideline running an offense so precise it could survive a video breakdown of every single possession by the opposing coaching staff. The Stockton to Malone pick and roll was the most predictable, most unstoppable action of the entire era. Everyone knew it was coming. Nobody could kill it. Nobody could even slow it down consistently over 4 quarters of real basketball. And still, the current narrative labels Utah as old and boring and weak conference. Utah was the definition of championship execution, and the flu game is the fingerprint that proves it. In Game 5, Michael Jordan was visibly, physically breaking. Barely standing during timeouts. Weight dropping. Face gray. Michael Jordan scored 38 points and buried a dagger 3 that Michael Jordan should not have been able to lift under those conditions. And that only happened because Utah was that good. Utah forced Michael Jordan to summon something inhuman just to survive Game 5. That is not the mark of weak competition. That is the mark of a team good enough to almost break history in half. Verdict on Defendant 5, not guilty. Louder this time. Loud enough to reach the back row of the courtroom balcony. 1998. Utah, again. 62 wins. Again. Karl Malone in the MVP conversation. Again. And this time, the Bulls were the ones limping into June. Michael Jordan was 35 years old. Scottie Pippen was breaking down physically. Dennis Rodman was fading from his defensive peak. Chicago was not the wrecking crew of '96. Utah, meanwhile, believed with every cell in their bodies that this was finally the year. Home court in Game 6. The scoreboard in Utah's favor with under a minute left. And then Michael Jordan did the thing that permanently rewired basketball forever. Drive. Layup. Cuts the deficit. Steals the ball clean off Karl Malone with zero help defense in sight anywhere. Isolates against Brian Russell. Crossover. Push, or no push, decide later. Pull up. Splash. Championship number 6. And the debate about that push has been running for almost 30 years, but the debate itself is a distraction. 6 games. Countless possessions. Utah had endless chances to close it out and lift a trophy of their own. Utah did not lose because of one contact call in the final seconds. Utah lost because Michael Jordan refused, on a molecular level, to let the game end any other way. Verdict on defendant 6, not guilty. Case closed. Forever locked shut. Now line up all 6 defendants side by side and look at what the easy competition narrative is actually asking you to believe. 58 wins. 57 wins. 62 wins. 64 wins. 64 wins. 62 wins. 3 separate MVPs sitting on the opposing benches, for counting MVP caliber seasons across the 6 years. A Defensive Player of the Year. Hall of Fame point guards, Hall of Fame forwards, Hall of Fame coaches on the opposing sidelines. 6 finals. 0 cupcakes. Not a single one anywhere in sight. If somebody hands you a playoff bracket where the average opponent wins 61 games and features an MVP or a DPOY every other year, that is not an easy road. That is a gauntlet in a tuxedo, and it is trying to kill you between the second and third handshake at the front door of the arena entrance under bright lights. So where does the lie come from? That is the real question. That is the question nobody actually asks out loud into a microphone. Because if the numbers are this clear, if the receipts are this loud, why is the myth this strong? The answer is uncomfortable, and the answer is the actual thesis of this entire breakdown. Michael Jordan didn't just beat these teams. Michael Jordan erased them. That is the hidden villain of this entire story. Not the media. Not the internet. Not lazy analysts on cable television. The hidden villain is Michael Jordan's own dominance. Because greatness has a side effect nobody talks about openly. Greatness devours the reputation of everyone it defeats. When Michael Jordan swept the Lakers stopped being a 58-win juggernaut in the public memory and became the old Lakers. When Michael Jordan crushed Portland stopped being a finals-caliber machine and became Drexler's team. When Michael Jordan buried Phoenix stopped being the 62-win MVP squad and became Barkley with no defense around him. When Michael Jordan closed Seattle stopped being a 64-win beast and became the team that only won 2 games. When Michael Jordan dismissed Utah twice, Utah stopped being the most disciplined offense of the decade and became boring old guys with no athleticism. This is the Jordan effect. Winning doesn't just take trophies. Winning takes reputations. Winning takes memory. Winning takes the entire history books hostage and rewrites the entries in permanent ink while everyone is asleep at the wheel and dreaming of a different outcome entirely. And here's the sharpest edge of the entire argument. This same exact pattern is already happening in real time to modern dynasties right now under your nose in broad daylight without a mask on. Watch Golden State. Watch how the same voices that call Michael Jordan's opponents weak already whisper that the Warriors' opponents were mid, that the Warriors' era was watered down, that their opponents can't compare to older generations of hardened veterans. Watch how the Cleveland Cavaliers, who beat a 73-win team in the finals, are already being downgraded in retro takes right now on social media timelines every single hour on the clock. 20 years from now, this exact conversation will be recycled with different jerseys and different names and different comment sections screaming the same tired lines at each other on repeat until they lose their voices. Because the psychology of legacy is simple. When a dynasty wins too often, the crowd rewrites the mountain into a hill. It has to. Otherwise the champion becomes too big to argue against at the dinner table. And nothing threatens a fanbase's identity more than admitting the other guy climbed a real mountain in real weather with a real team trying to shove them off the ledge into the darkness below the tree line at midnight. So the final verdict. Did Michael Jordan face easy finals competition? Not even close. Not even in the same universe as close. Michael Jordan faced an average of 61 wins across 6 finals. Michael Jordan faced multiple MVPs, a Defensive Player of the Year, and Hall of Fame cores on nearly every single opponent. Michael Jordan faced home court disadvantage in the biggest games, an entire generation of physical hand-check defense that would be flagrant fouls today, and rosters that would have been remembered as legendary if literally anyone else had been standing in front of them. The teams weren't weak. The teams were smashed by a player who refused to let them be remembered as strong. That is not the fingerprint of an easy road. That is the fingerprint of the most brutally efficient closer the sport has ever produced. So the next time someone opens up a comment section and types the words, "Michael Jordan never had real competition," send them this breakdown. Send them the 61 win average. Send them the MVP ledger. Send them the Gary Payton adjustment tape. Send them the flu game footage. Send them the Game 6 dagger over Brian Russell. And then ask them one final question that always ends the argument at the exact same spot every single time it gets asked out loud. If Michael Jordan's road was easy, then why does history have to keep rewriting the mountains just to fit their story into a comfortable shape that soothes their ego at night before bed and lets them sleep in peace? Drop your answer down in the comments and let the debate breathe on its own for a minute without interruption or moderation. Hit that like button so more people see the actual truth behind the tape and the numbers written in blood and sweat in 61 wins. Subscribe because the next breakdown is going to burn even brighter than this one, and you don't want to be the last person to hear about it in your group chat tomorrow morning at breakfast. And always remember one thing on your way out the door tonight. Legends aren't measured by who they played. Legends are measured by who never recovered from playing them, and Michael Jordan left 6 of them buried in June forever, still waiting for a resurrection that history refuses to allow to ever come, no matter how loud the modern takes get on any timeline anywhere on planet Earth tonight or tomorrow or the day after. Michael Jordan didn't just win 6 championships against real opponents, Michael Jordan turned real opponents into ghosts, and ghosts don't get remembered.